Welcome to Learn English with Audio Story Level 3. Today's story is called The Old Key. Have you ever found something so mysterious that you couldn't stop thinking about it? A few weeks after his grandfather passed away, Ethan was helping his family clean out an old house. Most of the items were ordinary. Old books, photographs, furniture, nothing unusual. Then, hidden inside a dusty wooden chest, Ethan found something strange. An old rusty key. The key had no label. No note, no explanation, but engraved into the metal were 4 mysterious words. Find the oak tree. Nobody in the family knew what the words meant. Nobody knew what the key opened, and nobody knew why Ethan's grandfather had kept it hidden for so many years. It should have been a simple mystery, but it wasn't, because that key would lead Ethan to a forgotten photograph. An ancient oak tree, a hidden underground chamber, and a secret that had been waiting for decades to be discovered. The deeper he searched, the more impossible the mystery became. Why had his grandfather left the clues behind? What was hidden beneath the oak tree? And what was waiting at the end of the journey? Some people spend their lives searching for treasure. Ethan was about to discover a treasure far more valuable than gold. Stay with us until the very end, because the final secret behind the old key changes everything. Now relax, listen carefully, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Key. Learn English through Story Level 3. The morning was cool and quiet when Ethan arrived at his grandfather's house. The old house stood at the end of a narrow country road, surrounded by tall trees and a large garden that had not been carefully maintained for several months. Ethan stopped near the front gate and looked at the familiar building. A feeling of sadness filled his heart. Only 3 months had passed since his grandfather, William Parker, had passed away. Even now, it was difficult to accept. Growing up, Ethan had spent countless weekends at this house. His grandfather had taught him how to ride a bicycle on the driveway. He had taught him how to plant vegetables in the garden. He had taught him how to fish at the nearby lake. Most importantly, he had taught him patience, honesty, and kindness. William Parker had never been a rich man. He had never owned expensive cars or large businesses, but everyone in town respected him. He was known for helping neighbors whenever they needed assistance. If someone needed repairs, William would help. If someone was sick, William would visit. If someone felt lonely, William would sit and talk with them for hours. To Ethan, his grandfather had always seemed wise. Sometimes, when Ethan was younger, he joked that his grandfather knew everything. William would simply laugh. "I don't know everything," he would say. "I've just lived long enough to learn a few things." Ethan smiled as he remembered those words. Then he opened the gate and walked toward the house. Several family members were already there. His mother stood near the front porch, speaking with his aunt. Inside, his uncle was sorting old documents. Boxes were stacked throughout the living room. The family had gathered to finish organizing William's belongings. The house would soon be sold. Before that happened, everything needed to be sorted. Some items would be donated. Some would be kept by family members. Others would simply be thrown away. As Ethan entered the house, memories appeared everywhere. The old clock still hung on the wall. The same bookshelf remained in the corner. His grandfather's favorite chair sat beside the window. For a moment, Ethan could almost imagine him sitting there, reading a newspaper and smiling. But the chair was empty. The reality returned. His grandfather was gone. His mother approached him. "Good morning." "Morning." She gave him a gentle hug. "How are you doing?" Ethan shrugged. "Some days are easier than others." She nodded. "I understand." For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she smiled softly. "Let's finish this together." The morning passed slowly. Everyone worked in different rooms. Ethan began in the upstairs bedroom. The room contained dozens of books, old clothes, and family photographs. Dust floated through the sunlight coming from the windows. As he sorted through shelves and drawers, he discovered many forgotten treasures. There were photo albums filled with pictures from decades earlier. There were handwritten recipes. There were old letters exchanged between family members. Each item seemed connected to a memory. Several times Ethan stopped working simply to look through old photographs. One picture showed his grandfather as a young man standing beside a bicycle. Another showed him holding a fish nearly as large as himself. There were wedding photos, vacation photos, birthday celebrations, a lifetime captured on paper. Ethan carefully placed many of the photographs into a box marked Keep. They were too important to throw away. Around noon, the family took a break for lunch. Everyone gathered in the kitchen. The conversation was quiet. Although people occasionally laughed at old memories, there was still sadness in the room. Losing someone important always left an empty space. After lunch, Ethan decided to explore the attic. The attic had always fascinated him as a child. It was filled with mysterious objects and forgotten belongings. Whenever he visited, he wanted to search through everything. His grandfather rarely allowed it. Too dusty, he would say. Maybe another day. That another day had never arrived. Now Ethan climbed the narrow wooden stairs leading upward. The attic door creaked as he pushed it open. A warm, dusty smell filled the air. Sunlight entered through a small window. Old furniture stood beneath white sheets. Boxes filled every corner. The space looked untouched. Ethan moved carefully between the stacks. Many boxes contained ordinary things. Old magazines, holiday decorations, broken tools. Nothing unusual. After nearly an hour of searching, he prepared to leave. Then something caught his attention. Near the far wall stood a small wooden chest. Unlike the other items, it looked carefully placed, almost protected. Dust covered the surface, but the chest itself appeared well made. Ethan walked toward it. The chest was not large, perhaps the size of a briefcase. Its dark wood was worn with age. Metal corners reinforced the edges. A small brass handle decorated the front. Ethan knelt beside it. For some reason, he felt curious, very curious. He gently brushed away the dust. The chest did not appear locked. Slowly, he lifted the lid. The hinges creaked softly. Inside were several personal items: a pocket watch, a collection of old coins, a leather notebook, a few black and white photographs, and beneath everything else lay a small cloth bundle. Ethan picked it up carefully. The cloth felt old and fragile. As he unfolded it, something metallic fell into his hand. It was a key, an old key. Very old. The metal was dark with age. Small areas of rust covered the surface. Its design looked unusual. Unlike modern keys, it was longer and heavier. The handle contained decorative patterns. Ethan turned it over in his hand. It felt important, almost significant, yet he had no idea why. He examined it more closely. Then he noticed something strange. Words had been engraved into the metal. The letters were small but readable. He leaned closer. The message said, "Find the oak tree." Ethan stared at the words. His eyebrows rose. What? He read them again. Find the oak tree. The message made no sense. What oak tree? Why would those words be carved into a key? More importantly, what did the key open? The questions immediately filled his mind. He searched the chest for answers. Perhaps there was a note. Perhaps there was an explanation. But he found nothing. Only ordinary belongings. No instructions. No clues. No information. Just the key. Ethan sat quietly on the attic floor. The mystery fascinated him. His grandfather had carefully stored the key inside a special chest. The engraved message seemed intentional. Clearly, it meant something. But what? Eventually, Ethan carried the chest downstairs. His family was sorting items in the living room. "Look what I found." Several relatives looked up. His uncle examined the chest. "I haven't seen that in years." "Do you know anything about it?" Ethan asked. His uncle shook his head. "Not really." Ethan showed everyone the key. People gathered around. His mother took it first. She turned it over carefully. "That's unusual." His aunt looked at the engraving. "Find the oak tree?" "That's what it says." Strange. One by one, family members examined the key. Nobody recognized it. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody understood the message. The mystery only deepened. "Maybe it's from an old shed," his uncle suggested. Ethan shook his head. "Then why hide it in a chest?" His uncle shrugged. "Good question." Throughout the afternoon, the family discussed possibilities. Could it open a box, a door, a safe, an old piece of furniture? Every suggestion seemed possible, yet none felt convincing. As the hours passed, Ethan became increasingly interested. Something about the key bothered him, not in a bad way, in a curious way. It felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved, and he wanted answers. Before leaving that evening, Ethan asked permission to keep the key. Nobody objected. After all, nobody knew what it was for. His mother smiled. "Looks like you've found a new hobby." "Maybe." "You're going to investigate, aren't you?" Ethan laughed. "You know me too well." The drive home felt different. The key rested in the passenger seat beside him. Several times he glanced toward it. Each time new questions appeared. Why had his grandfather kept it? Why engrave those words? Why hide it away? When Ethan arrived home, he placed the key on his kitchen table. Then he made coffee and sat down across from it. The object seemed ordinary, yet it held his attention completely. He picked it up again. The metal felt cool in his hand. The engraving remained clear. "Find the oak tree," he repeated the words aloud. Nothing happened. No sudden realization. No answer. Only more curiosity. That evening, Ethan searched family records and old photographs. Perhaps there was an oak tree connected to his grandfather's past. Maybe a farm, maybe a property, maybe a special location. Hours passed. He found many pictures, but nothing obvious. Just before midnight, he noticed something interesting. In one old photograph taken many years ago, his grandfather stood beside a massive tree. The image was faded. The details were difficult to see, yet the tree looked enormous. Could it be an oak tree? Ethan leaned closer. His pulse quickened slightly. For the first time all day, he felt he might have discovered something important. Unfortunately, the photograph provided no location, no date, no information. Still, it was enough to keep him interested, very interested. He placed the photograph beside the key. Then he looked at both items. The mystery was growing, and somehow he felt certain this was only the beginning. Before going to bed, Ethan placed the key inside his desk drawer. But even after turning off the lights, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The words repeated in his mind. Find the oak tree. What oak tree? Why was it important? And what secret had his grandfather hidden all these years? As sleep slowly approached, Ethan made a decision. He would find the answer. No matter how long it took, no matter where the clues led, he would uncover the truth behind the old key. Because somewhere, hidden behind that simple piece of metal, was a story waiting to be discovered, and Ethan intended to find it. End of Chapter 1. Tap Chapter 2, The Hidden Clue. Learn English through Story Level 3. Ethan woke up earlier than usual the next morning. For a few moments he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Then he remembered the key. Immediately, his curiosity returned. The old key rested inside his desk drawer, and the mysterious words engraved on it echoed in his mind. Find the oak tree. The message seemed simple, yet it raised dozens of questions. What oak tree? Where was it? Why had his grandfather hidden the key for so many years? And most importantly, what did the key open? Ethan got out of bed and walked directly to his desk. He opened the drawer and picked up the key. The metal felt cool in his hand. In the morning sunlight, he examined every detail again, the decorative patterns, the worn edges, the small areas of rust, and the engraved words. Nothing had changed overnight. The mystery remained. But Ethan felt determined. If there was a clue somewhere, he would find it. After breakfast, he spread several items across his dining table. The key. The old photograph of his grandfather beside the large tree. A notebook and a laptop. He planned to approach the mystery like a detective. His grandfather had always loved solving puzzles. Perhaps this was one final puzzle he had left behind. Ethan smiled at the thought. "Okay, Grandpa," he said quietly. "Let's see what you've hidden." He started with the photograph. The picture was old and slightly damaged. The corners were bent. The colors had faded over time. Still, several details remained visible. His grandfather looked much younger, perhaps 30 years old. He stood beside a huge tree. The trunk was thick, the branches stretched in every direction. Even in the faded image, the tree looked impressive. Ethan turned the photograph over. Nothing. No date, no location, no writing. He sighed. That would have been too easy. Next, he opened his laptop and began researching oak trees. At first, the search seemed ridiculous. Thousands of oak trees existed, millions probably. How could he possibly identify one specific tree? Yet as he continued reading, he discovered something interesting. Certain old oak trees were famous landmarks. Some had names. Some were hundreds of years old. Some appeared in local histories. Perhaps the message referred to a specific tree rather than an ordinary one. The idea seemed promising. Still, he needed more information. A few hours later, Ethan drove back to his grandfather's house. The family had finished most of the cleaning, but several boxes remained. His mother looked surprised when he arrived. "Back already? I need to check something." "The key again?" Ethan laughed. "Of course." She shook her head. "You've become obsessed." "Maybe a little." His mother smiled. Your grandfather would have enjoyed this. Those words encouraged him. If anyone appreciated curiosity, it had been William Parker. Ethan headed directly toward the living room. Several boxes of photographs remained unsorted. If answers existed anywhere, perhaps they were hidden among old family pictures. He sat on the floor and opened the first box. Hundreds of photographs filled the container. Family gatherings, birthday parties, vacations, school events. Decades of memories. Carefully, Ethan began examining each image. Hours passed. Most photographs revealed nothing useful. Still, he continued searching. Then, sometime during the afternoon, he found something unusual. It was another photograph featuring the same tree. This picture was clearer. The tree appeared even larger than before, and this time Ethan noticed something he had missed. Near the base of the trunk stood a wooden sign. The image was blurry, but the sign definitely existed. His heart beat faster. A sign meant information. Information meant clues. He rushed to find a magnifying glass. After several minutes of careful examination, he could barely make out a few letters. Not enough to read the entire sign, but enough to identify part of a word. The letters appeared to spell oak. Ethan smiled. At least he now knew he was looking in the right direction. The tree almost certainly was an oak tree. The key's message and the photographs were connected. That much seemed clear. The question was how. As he continued searching through photographs, another discovery emerged. A third picture showed his grandfather standing beside the same tree. This time he wasn't alone. Several other people stood nearby. One of them immediately caught Ethan's attention. It was his grandfather's closest childhood friend, Walter Jenkins. Walter still lived in the nearby town. In fact, Ethan had seen him only a few weeks earlier at a community event. If anyone knew the story behind the tree, perhaps Walter did. Excited by the possibility, Ethan carefully packed the photographs. Then he drove into town. Walter owned a small hardware store near the town square. The business had operated for decades. As Ethan entered, a bell rang above the door. Walter looked up from behind the counter. His face brightened. "Ethan!" "Hello, Walter." "It's good to see you." "You too." Walter walked around the counter and shook his hand. "How's your family?" "We're doing okay." Walter nodded. "I miss your grandfather." "Me too." For a moment, sadness passed between them. Then Ethan explained his visit. He showed Walter the photograph. Immediately, the older man's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be. You recognize it?" "Of course." Walter laughed softly. "I haven't seen this picture in years." Ethan leaned forward. "The tree. Do you know where it is?" Walter studied the photograph. Then he smiled. "Yes." Ethan's excitement grew. "You do?" "I certainly do." For the first time, the mystery felt solvable. Walter motioned toward a pair of chairs near the counter. "Sit down." Ethan obeyed. The older man settled into the opposite chair. Then he began speaking. "That tree was famous around here when we were young." "It was?" "Oh, yes." "Why?" Walter smiled. "Because it was enormous." He pointed toward the photograph. "We called it the giant oak." Ethan listened carefully. The tree stood on an old piece of land several miles outside town. "Does it still exist?" Walter nodded. "As far as I know." A wave of excitement passed through Ethan. The tree was real, and it still existed. At last, he was making progress. Walter continued. "Your grandfather loved that place." "He did?" "Very much." "Why?" Walter leaned back thoughtfully. "That's a good question." For a moment, he seemed lost in memory. Then he smiled. "When we were teenagers, we spent hours there." "Doing what?" "Talking, planning, dreaming." Walter laughed. "We thought we knew everything." Ethan smiled. "Most teenagers do." "Exactly," the older man nodded. "The giant oak became our meeting place." Those words caught Ethan's attention. Meeting place, that sounded important. Did anything special happen there? Walter's expression changed slightly. For a brief moment, he seemed uncertain. Then he shrugged. "Nothing I can clearly remember." The answer felt incomplete. Not exactly dishonest, but incomplete. Ethan noticed. Still, he decided not to press further. At least not yet. Instead, he asked for directions. Walter explained how to find the property. The route led several miles into the countryside near an abandoned farm road, far from the main highway. Ethan wrote everything down. Before leaving, he showed Walter the key. The older man's reaction surprised him. Walter became silent. Very silent. He examined the key carefully, longer than necessary. His eyes lingered on the engraving. Then he handed it back. "Interesting. Do you recognize it?" Walter hesitated. For a moment, Ethan thought he might reveal something important, but then the older man shook his head. No. The answer felt strange, not because of what Walter said, because of how he said it. Ethan sensed there was more to the story, much more. That evening he returned home. The photographs lay on the table beside the key. For hours he studied everything again. A pattern was emerging. The key, the oak tree, his grandfather, Walter, all were connected somehow. The connection remained hidden, but it existed. Ethan felt certain. As darkness fell outside, he examined the photographs one more time. This time he noticed something entirely new. In the background of one image stood a small structure. At first glance it appeared insignificant. But after enlarging the picture on his computer, he could see it more clearly. A wooden shed, or perhaps a small storage building. The structure stood surprisingly close to the tree. His pulse quickened. Could the key belong to that building? The possibility seemed reasonable. Old buildings often used old keys. Maybe the answer was waiting there. Yet something still bothered him. If the key merely opened a shed, why hide it? Why engrave a message? Why keep it inside a special chest? No, the mystery had to be bigger than that. Much bigger. Late that night, Ethan searched through family records again. This time he focused specifically on his grandfather. Property records, letters, personal documents, anything connected to the countryside location. Most of the information seemed ordinary. Then he discovered an old journal. The journal belonged to William Parker. Many entries described daily life, weather, work, family events. Simple observations. But one entry immediately stood out. The date was nearly 25 years old. The passage was short, very short. It read, "Some secrets are worth protecting. One day, when the time is right, the oak will tell its story." Ethan stared at the sentence. His heart raced. This was not coincidence. The oak tree clearly mattered, and apparently it held a secret. The journal offered no additional explanation, no details, no clues, just that one mysterious sentence. Still, it changed everything. Now Ethan knew something important. His grandfather had intentionally hidden information. The tree was not simply a childhood memory. It was connected to a secret protected for decades. Suddenly, the mystery felt larger than ever. What kind of secret? A family secret? A hidden object? A forgotten story? The possibilities filled his mind. Sleep became impossible. He paced around his apartment, thinking, questioning, imagining. Finally, he made a decision. The next morning he would visit the giant oak. Not next week. Not later. Tomorrow. The clues had pointed him there. The key demanded it. The journal confirmed it. And his curiosity would not allow him to wait. Before going to bed, Ethan placed the key beside the photograph. The old metal reflected the soft light of the lamp. For a moment he imagined his grandfather watching, perhaps smiling, perhaps knowing exactly what would happen next. Ethan smiled too. "Don't worry, Grandpa." He picked up the key. "I'll find the answer." Then he looked once more at the engraved message. "Find the oak tree." For the first time since discovering the key, those words no longer seemed impossible, because now he knew where the oak tree was, and tomorrow he would finally see it with his own eyes. What he would discover there remained a mystery. But deep inside, Ethan felt certain of one thing. The real adventure was about to begin. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Journey to the Oak Tree. Learn English through Story Level 3. Ethan barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought about the key. The old metal key rested on his bedside table. Beside it lay the photograph of his grandfather standing near the giant oak, and next to the photograph was the journal containing the mysterious sentence, "Some secrets are worth protecting. One day, when the time is right, the oak will tell its story." The words repeated in his mind again and again. What story? What secret? And why had his grandfather protected it for so many years? At 6 o'clock in the morning, Ethan gave up trying to sleep. He got out of bed, took a shower, and prepared for the day. His excitement made it impossible to sit still. Today he would finally visit the giant oak. After a quick breakfast, he gathered everything he might need. The key, the photographs, his grandfather's journal, a notebook, a flashlight, a bottle of water, and his phone. He placed everything into a backpack. Before leaving, he picked up the key one more time. The metal felt heavier than usual, perhaps because it carried so many unanswered questions. Ethan slipped it carefully into his pocket. Then he left his apartment. The morning air was cool and fresh. Thin clouds drifted across the sky. The weather seemed perfect for a journey. As he started his car, a strange feeling settled over him. Part excitement, part nervousness, and part anticipation. For days he had followed clues. Today he would finally reach the place at the centre of the mystery. The countryside roads were quiet. Fields stretched endlessly in every direction. Occasionally Ethan passed small farms and isolated houses. The scenery reminded him of childhood visits with his grandfather. Back then, these roads had seemed ordinary. Today they felt different. Today they seemed connected to something important. After about 40 minutes, he reached the old farm road Walter had described. The road was narrow and rough. Tall grass grew along both sides. Very few vehicles appeared to use it anymore. Ethan slowed his car and continued forward. The deeper he travelled, the more isolated the area became. Eventually, the road ended near an open field. According to Walter's directions, the giant oak should be nearby. Ethan parked his car and stepped outside. The silence surprised him. There were no nearby houses, no traffic, no city sounds, only the wind moving through the grass. For a moment, he simply stood there. The peaceful atmosphere reminded him of stories his grandfather used to tell, stories about simpler times, stories about adventure, stories about hidden mysteries waiting to be discovered. A small smile appeared on Ethan's face. Then he began walking. The field stretched before him. Wildflowers covered parts of the landscape. Birds flew overhead. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ground. After several minutes, Ethan reached a small hill. As he climbed it, his heart began beating faster. Something stood on the other side, something enormous. When he reached the top, he stopped. The giant oak. There it was. Even from a distance, the tree looked incredible. The photographs had not done it justice. The trunk was massive. Its branches spread across the sky like giant arms. The tree towered above everything around it. For a few seconds, Ethan could only stare. The oak seemed ancient, powerful, timeless. It was easy to understand why people remembered it. Slowly, he walked closer. The closer he came, the larger the tree appeared. The trunk was so wide that several people could stand side by side and still not reach around it. Deep lines marked the bark. The roots stretched across the ground like natural sculptures. Ethan stopped at the base of the tree. A feeling of awe washed over him. His grandfather had stood here. Walter had stood here. Generations had likely stood here. The tree had witnessed decades of history, perhaps even centuries. He removed the old photograph from his backpack. Then he compared it to the real tree. There was no doubt. This was the same place. The same oak, the same landmark connected to the mysterious key. For several minutes, Ethan explored the area. He examined the bark, the roots, the surrounding ground. At first, he found nothing unusual. Then something caught his eye. A carving, near the base of the trunk, partially hidden by age and weather. Ethan knelt down. His pulse quickened. The symbol looked familiar, very familiar. He reached into his pocket and removed the key. Then he compared the two. The decorative pattern carved into the tree matched the design engraved on the key. Exactly. Ethan stared in disbelief. The connection was undeniable. Someone had intentionally marked the tree. And whoever did it had used the same symbol found on the key. "This can't be a coincidence," he whispered. Excitement surged through him. For the first time he had physical proof. The key belonged here. The oak tree was definitely part of the mystery. But what came next? Ethan studied the carving more carefully. It appeared old, very old. The edges were worn. Yet one detail stood out. A small arrow. The arrow pointed toward the north side of the tree. Immediately, Ethan stood and followed its direction. He walked slowly around the trunk. Every step increased his curiosity. What would he find? Another clue? A hidden compartment? An old building? The possibilities raced through his mind. Then he noticed something strange. One section of ground looked different. The grass there was thinner. The soil appeared slightly uneven. At first glance, it seemed insignificant. But after examining the area more closely, Ethan became convinced something was unusual. He knelt down. Using his hands, he brushed away leaves and loose dirt. Within moments, he uncovered a flat piece of stone. His heart pounded. The stone did not appear natural. Its surface was smooth, almost deliberate. Carefully, Ethan cleared more dirt. The stone grew larger. Eventually, he revealed most of it. It looked like a cover, a lid, something designed to hide whatever lay beneath. Ethan sat back and stared. Could this be it? Could the mystery finally be revealing itself? His excitement was mixed with caution. The stone appeared heavy, very heavy. Using both hands, he tried lifting it. Nothing happened. The cover barely moved. Ethan frowned. Then he noticed a small metal ring attached to one edge. The ring had been hidden beneath the dirt. He grabbed it firmly. This time, when he pulled, the stone shifted. Slowly, gradually, with considerable effort. Finally, the cover moved aside. A dark opening appeared underneath. Ethan froze. For several seconds, he simply stared. The opening led into the ground, a hidden space, exactly the kind of discovery he had imagined. Yet seeing it in reality felt completely different. His hands trembled slightly. He switched on his flashlight and aimed it downward. The beam revealed a small underground chamber. Not very deep, perhaps 4 feet below the surface. Inside rested a wooden box. Nothing else. Just a box. Ethan's heart raced. The box looked old. Extremely old. Dust covered its surface. Time had darkened the wood. Yet despite its age, it appeared surprisingly well preserved. Slowly, Ethan climbed into the chamber. His shoes touched the dirt floor. The air felt cool and still. For a moment, he simply stood there looking at the box. Decades. Perhaps it had remained hidden for decades. Waiting. Protected beneath the oak tree. Protected by his grandfather. Protected by the mysterious key. Then Ethan noticed something important. A lock. A brass lock attached to the front of the box. His breath caught. The key. This was what the key opened. At least it seemed likely. He knelt beside the box. His hands shook slightly as he removed the key from his pocket. This was the moment he had been working toward, the moment the mystery might finally reveal itself. Slowly, he inserted the key into the lock. Perfect fit. His heart nearly stopped. The key belonged to the box, without question. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared. The realization felt overwhelming. His grandfather had left a trail. The photographs, the oak tree, the journal, the key. Everything had led to this place. Everything had led to this box. Taking a deep breath, Ethan turned the key. The lock clicked. A sharp metallic sound echoed inside the chamber. The box was unlocked. Yet Ethan did not open it immediately. Instead, he sat quietly. His emotions surprised him. Excitement, curiosity, gratitude, and sadness. Because at that moment, he wished his grandfather were there. He wished they could solve the mystery together. He wished he could ask questions, so many questions. But life didn't work that way. Sometimes answers arrived after the people who held them were gone. Ethan placed his hand on the lid. Then he paused. Something felt strange. Not wrong, just significant. He realized that once he opened the box, the mystery would change forever. The unknown would become known. The search would become discovery. For days he had imagined this moment. Now it had arrived. Finally, Ethan lifted the lid. The hinges creaked softly. Dust drifted into the air. His flashlight illuminated the contents, and then he froze. Inside the box lay several objects. A bundle of letters tied with faded string. A small leather journal. Several photographs, and an envelope resting on top. The envelope immediately caught his attention, because written across the front, in his grandfather's handwriting, were 3 words. For Ethan Parker. His breath stopped. The message was addressed directly to him, not to the family, not to future generations. To him. Ethan stared at the envelope. Confusion mixed with amazement. How could his grandfather have known? How could he have known Ethan would eventually find the key? Find the oak tree? Find the hidden box? The question seemed impossible. Yet there was the evidence. His name, written clearly on the envelope. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't move. The discovery felt personal, deeply personal. It was as though his grandfather had reached across time, as though he had planned this journey years earlier. Carefully, deliberately, patiently, waiting for the right moment. Waiting for Ethan. Finally, Ethan picked up the envelope. The paper felt fragile with age. The handwriting was unmistakable, his grandfather's handwriting. A lump formed in his throat. Suddenly, the mystery felt larger than treasure. Larger than secrets, larger than hidden boxes. This was about family, about legacy, about a message left behind by someone he loved. And somehow, Ethan knew the answers he sought were inside that envelope. But before opening it, he took one last look around the underground chamber. The oak tree above, the hidden box, the decades of history, the journey that had brought him here. Then he looked down at the envelope again. The next clue awaited. And whatever happened next would change everything. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Secret Underground Box. Learn English through Story Level 3. Ethan sat quietly inside the underground chamber. The hidden box rested in front of him. The envelope remained in his hands. For several moments, he simply stared at his name written across the front. For Ethan Parker. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to his grandfather. The same handwriting he had seen in birthday cards, letters, and the old journal. A strange mixture of emotions filled his heart. Excitement, curiosity, sadness, and gratitude. For days, Ethan had searched for answers. Now those answers seemed to be waiting only a few centimeters away. Yet he hesitated. Opening the envelope felt important, almost sacred, as though he were crossing a bridge between the past and the present. Finally, he took a deep breath. Then he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. The edges were worn. Gently, Ethan unfolded it. At the top of the page, he saw the familiar handwriting. Dear Ethan, if you are reading this letter, then you have found the key. And if you have found the key, then you have also found the oak. If that is true, then you have already solved the first part of the mystery. Congratulations. I always believed you would. You were curious even as a child. You asked questions about everything. You never accepted easy answers. That is why I chose you. Ethan paused. His grandfather had chosen him. The words felt personal, very personal. He continued reading. You may be wondering why I created this treasure hunt. The answer is simple. Some lessons cannot be taught directly. Some lessons must be discovered. When I was young, someone taught me that the greatest treasures in life are rarely made of gold or money. At the time, I did not understand. It took me many years to learn what those words truly meant. I hope this journey helps you understand them sooner than I did. Ethan lowered the letter for a moment. The words sounded exactly like something his grandfather would say. William Parker had always loved lessons hidden inside stories. Whenever Ethan visited as a child, his grandfather rarely gave direct advice. Instead, he shared experiences, stories, questions, little puzzles that encouraged Ethan to think for himself. Now, even after his death, he seemed to be doing the same thing. Ethan smiled softly. Then he continued reading. Inside this box, you will find pieces of a story, my story, but not all of it. To understand everything, you must continue searching. The next clue is hidden among the photographs. Look carefully. The answer is there. Before you leave, remember one thing. The oak protects memories. And memories are often more valuable than treasure. With love, Grandpa. The letter ended there. Ethan stared at the page. Part of him felt satisfied. Another part felt frustrated. The mystery wasn't over, not even close. His grandfather had given him another clue, another puzzle, another challenge. Yet somehow, Ethan wasn't surprised. If William Parker had hidden a key inside a chest and buried a box beneath an oak tree, he certainly wasn't going to reveal everything at once. Carefully, Ethan folded the letter and placed it beside him. Then he examined the remaining contents of the box. There were 6 photographs, a small leather journal, and several letters tied together with faded string. He decided to start with the photographs. One by one, he spread them across the floor of the chamber. Most appeared very old. Many were black and white. The first showed a group of young men standing beside a truck. One of them was clearly his grandfather. The second showed several people working on a farm. The third displayed a family picnic. The fourth featured the giant oak itself. The fifth showed an old building. And the sixth made Ethan stop. Immediately, something about it felt important. The photograph showed his grandfather standing beside another man. Both looked young, perhaps in their 20s. Behind them stood a small stone building. At first glance, the image seemed ordinary. Then Ethan noticed a symbol carved above the doorway. The same symbol found on the key. The same symbol carved into the oak tree. His pulse quickened. This had to be the clue. He leaned closer. The building looked old, very old, perhaps abandoned. The photograph had no writing on the front, so Ethan turned it over. There, written in faded ink, were 4 words. The answer lies ahead. Ethan stared. His grandfather certainly enjoyed being mysterious. Still, the message confirmed his suspicion. The building mattered. The symbol connected everything. The key, the tree, and now this structure. Somehow they were all part of the same story. He examined the photograph more carefully. The stone building stood near a hill. Trees filled the background. A narrow path led toward the entrance. Unfortunately, nothing revealed its location. No signs, no landmarks, no useful details. Ethan sighed. Another clue, another mystery. Then he turned his attention to the small leather journal. The cover was worn from age. Several pages had become loose. When he opened it, he discovered entries written by his grandfather decades earlier. The journal wasn't a daily diary. Instead, it contained memories, important events, personal reflections, stories from long ago. Ethan began reading. The first entries described William Parker's youth, growing up in a small town, helping his parents, working hard. Learning responsibility. The stories were interesting, but nothing seemed connected to the mystery. Then he reached an entry dated nearly 50 years earlier. The title immediately caught his attention. The summer everything changed. Ethan sat comfortably against the wall and began reading. I was 22 years old when Walter and I discovered something unusual. It happened during the hottest summer I can remember. The countryside was dry, the fields were brown, and every day seemed longer than the one before. One afternoon, we explored land near the oak. We were looking for nothing in particular, just adventure. At that age, adventure seemed important. Neither of us expected to find anything, but we did. Ethan's eyes widened. Walter. The same Walter who owned the hardware store. The same Walter who seemed uncomfortable when Ethan showed him the key. Suddenly, things began making sense. He continued reading. Hidden near an old hillside, we found a stone structure. Time had nearly erased it. Trees covered much of the entrance. Most people passed without noticing it. But somehow we found it. Inside, we discovered something that changed our lives. Not money, not gold. Something far more important. Something that taught us who we wanted to become. Ethan stopped. His grandfather wasn't describing treasure. He was describing a lesson. A life-changing experience. The journal continued for several pages. Yet frustratingly, William never explained exactly what they discovered. Instead, he wrote about the impact it had on their lives, about responsibility, integrity, character. The details remained hidden, almost intentionally hidden. Ethan rubbed his forehead. His grandfather truly enjoyed puzzles. Hours seemed to pass inside the underground chamber. The more Ethan read, the more questions appeared. Eventually, he climbed out of the chamber and sat beneath the giant oak. Fresh air filled his lungs. The enormous branches swayed gently overhead. For the first time since arriving, he looked up into the tree's canopy. Sunlight filtered through thousands of leaves. The scene felt peaceful, ancient, protective. Perhaps his grandfather was right. Perhaps the oak really did protect memories. After eating a small lunch from his backpack, Ethan called his mother. She answered almost immediately. "Hello? Mom, I found it. What did you find?" "The oak tree." Her voice brightened. "And?" "There was a hidden chamber." Silence. "Then there was a what?" Ethan laughed. "A hidden chamber beneath the tree." "You're serious?" "Completely serious." He spent several minutes explaining everything. The key, the box, the letter, the photographs, the journal. His mother listened carefully. When he finished, she remained quiet. Finally, she spoke. "You know, your grandfather always believed you were special." Ethan smiled. "He believed that about everyone." "No," her voice softened. "I mean, he always thought you would understand certain things." "What things?" "The importance of curiosity, the importance of asking questions." She paused. "He loved that about you." Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. Hearing those words meant a lot, especially now. After ending the call, he remained beneath the oak for a long time, thinking, reflecting, trying to understand. The mystery still existed, but something was changing. Originally, he believed the journey was about discovering a hidden object. Now he wasn't so sure. Perhaps the real purpose was something else entirely. Perhaps his grandfather wanted him to learn, to grow, to experience the same lessons he had learned decades earlier. The possibility felt increasingly likely. As afternoon became evening, Ethan packed the box's contents carefully. Before leaving, he returned to the underground chamber one final time. Using his flashlight, he inspected every corner. Most of the space appeared empty. Then he noticed something he had missed earlier. Words carved into the stone wall. Small, faded, almost invisible. Excitement rushed through him. He knelt beside the wall. The carving was old, extremely old, yet still readable. Slowly he traced the letters with his finger. The message said, The journey matters more than the destination. Ethan stared. The sentence sounded exactly like something his grandfather would write. Perhaps he had, or perhaps someone else had carved it long before. Either way, the message felt meaningful, very meaningful. For days, Ethan had focused entirely on reaching the end, finding the answer, solving the mystery. Yet the journey itself had already changed him. He had explored family history, connected with old memories, learned new things about his grandfather, and rediscovered places from his childhood. Maybe that was part of the treasure. Maybe that was part of the lesson. As the sun began setting, Ethan carefully replaced the stone cover. The underground chamber disappeared once again, hidden beneath the earth, protected by the oak tree, protected by time, protected by memory. Then he started walking back toward his car. The countryside glowed with golden evening light. Birds crossed the sky. The world seemed calm, peaceful. Yet Ethan's mind remained busy, because the mystery wasn't finished, not even close. The photograph of the stone building remained unexplained. The journal hinted at an important discovery. Walter clearly knew more than he admitted, and somewhere ahead waited the next clue, the next chapter, the next secret. As he drove home, Ethan thought about his grandfather's letter. One sentence stood out above all others. "The oak protects memories." At first he believed those words were symbolic. Now he wasn't so sure, because beneath the oak tree, memories had literally been preserved for decades. Letters, photographs, stories, lessons, a lifetime of experiences waiting to be discovered. And somehow Ethan felt the greatest discovery still lay ahead. The stone building, the mysterious symbol, Walter's hidden knowledge, everything pointed towards something larger, something important. Something his grandfather wanted him to find. As darkness settled across the countryside, Ethan glanced at the photograph resting on the passenger's seat. The stone building stared back at him. Silent, mysterious, waiting. And for the first time, Ethan felt certain of one thing. The next clue would bring him closer than ever to the truth. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Final Discovery. Learn English through Story Level 3. The photograph of the stone building stayed on Ethan's mind all night. Even after returning home from the giant oak, he could not stop thinking about it. The building seemed to hold the final piece of the puzzle. Everything pointed toward it. The key, the oak tree, the hidden chamber, the letters, the journal, even Walter's strange reaction. They all led to the same place. Somewhere, hidden behind that old stone structure, was the answer his grandfather wanted him to find. The next morning, Ethan woke before sunrise. The sky outside his window was still dark. For a moment, he remained in bed. Then he remembered the photograph. Immediately, he sat up. Today, he would find the building. Today, he would finish the journey. After a quick breakfast, he spread everything across his kitchen table. The photograph, the journal, the letters, the notebook filled with observations. He studied every detail once again. This time he focused entirely on the stone building. The more he examined the image, the more he noticed. A hill behind the structure, a fence in the distance, a narrow dirt path, and something else. A small church tower barely visible on the horizon. His eyes widened. That tower looked familiar, very familiar. He rushed to a shelf and pulled out an old map of the county. Several years earlier, like he had purchased it while researching local history. Carefully, he compared the map with the photograph. Within minutes, he identified a likely location. An old farming community located several kilometers beyond the giant oak. The area contained a historic church. The church tower matched the one in the photograph. His pulse quickened. This had to be it. Without wasting time, Ethan packed his backpack and left. The drive took nearly an hour. The roads became narrower as he traveled deeper into the countryside. Eventually, modern buildings disappeared completely. Only fields, forests, and small farms remained. The landscape looked almost unchanged from decades earlier. It was easy to imagine his grandfather traveling these same roads, easy to imagine him carrying secrets, easy to imagine him protecting memories. The thought made Ethan smile. Around mid-morning, he arrived near the old church. The tower looked exactly like the one in the photograph. Excitement surged through him. He parked nearby and began exploring on foot. The countryside was quiet. Only birds and wind disturbed the silence. Using the photograph as a guide, Ethan searched carefully. Then, after nearly 30 minutes, he saw it. The stone building. hidden among trees, partially covered by vines, just as his grandfather's journal had described. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared. The structure looked ancient, its stone walls were weathered by time, the wooden door appeared worn, yet despite its age the building remained standing, strong, silent, waiting. Slowly, Ethan approached. The same symbol appeared above the entrance, the symbol from the key, the symbol from the oak tree, the symbol from the hidden box. The connection was undeniable. Everything led here. He placed his hand against the old stone wall. The surface felt rough, cool, real. After all the searching, all the clues, and all the mysteries, he had finally arrived. But one question remained. What was inside? The door was closed, not locked, just closed. Ethan hesitated. Then he pushed gently. The hinges creaked, the door slowly opened. Sunlight entered the darkness, dust floated through the air. Inside, the building was surprisingly empty. No furniture, no treasure chests, no hidden machinery, only a few wooden benches and a large table. At first, Ethan felt confused. This was the final destination, this simple room. Yet as he stepped inside, he noticed something resting on the table. A wooden box, much smaller than the one beneath the oak tree, but clearly important. A folded note sat on top. His heart began racing again. Slowly, he approached. The note contained only a few words. "If you have reached this place, sit down before opening the box." Ethan laughed softly. Even now, his grandfather was giving instructions. He pulled out a chair and sat. Then he carefully opened the box. Inside he found dozens of old photographs, letters, certificates, and one thick envelope. The envelope immediately caught his attention. Written across the front were familiar words. "My final message." For several moments, Ethan simply looked at it. The journey was ending. The answers were finally within reach. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Inside was a long handwritten letter. His grandfather's handwriting filled every page. Ethan began reading. "Dear Ethan, if you are reading this letter, then you have completed the journey. I am proud of you, not because you found the clues, not because you solved the mystery. I am proud because you stayed curious. You kept moving forward even when the answers were unclear. That is one of the most valuable qualities a person can have. Curiosity opens doors that fear keeps closed." Ethan smiled. Those words sounded exactly like his grandfather. He continued reading. "You may still be wondering about the secret Walter and I discovered all those years ago. The truth is that there was never a hidden fortune. There was never buried gold. There was never a treasure waiting to make us rich. What we found was something different. When we were young, we discovered this building by accident. Inside were documents, photographs, and stories belonging to families who had lived here generations earlier. Many of those stories were in danger of being lost forever. Walter and I spent years preserving them. We collected photographs, we recorded memories, we saved pieces of local history. The real treasure was not money. The real treasure was remembering." Ethan paused. The words sank deeply into his heart. Remembering, that was the treasure. Not wealth, not gold, not valuables, memories, stories, lives. He continued reading. "Most people spend their lives chasing things, money, status, possessions. There is nothing wrong with success, but eventually every possession loses value. Cars grow old, buildings change, money comes and goes. What remains are the people we love and the memories we create. That is what I wanted you to discover." Ethan lowered the letter. Emotion filled his chest. Throughout the journey he had expected a dramatic revelation, a hidden fortune, a secret inheritance, something extraordinary. Instead he had found something much more meaningful, a lesson, a truth, a perspective on life. His grandfather continued, "The oak was never protecting treasure. It was protecting stories. The key was never meant to unlock wealth. It was meant to unlock understanding. If you have reached this point, then you already possess everything I hope to give you. You have patience, you have curiosity, you have compassion. And most importantly, you understand that every life contains stories worth preserving." Tears formed in Ethan's eyes. For the first time since his grandfather's death, he felt as though they were having a conversation. Not face to face, but heart to heart, across time, across memory, across generations. He continued reading. "There is one final thing you should know. Walter knows the rest of the story. After you finish reading, go visit him. He has something for you. Something I asked him to keep safe until the journey was complete. When you receive it, you will understand why this adventure mattered so much to me. With love, Grandpa. The letter ended. Silence filled the building. For several minutes, Ethan simply sat there, thinking, reflecting, feeling grateful. The mystery was solved, yet somehow the ending felt even better than he imagined. Because the journey had never been about treasure, it had been about connection, family, memory, legacy, the values his grandfather wanted to pass on. Eventually, Ethan packed the photographs and letters carefully. Then he left the stone building. The afternoon sun shone brightly overhead. The countryside seemed more beautiful than ever. Perhaps because he saw it differently now. Every road, every field, every building contained stories, lives, memories, just like his grandfather had said. Later that day, Ethan drove into town. The hardware store appeared exactly as before. When he entered, the bell rang above the door. Walter looked up. The older man immediately recognized something in Ethan's expression. A knowing smile appeared. "You found it." Ethan nodded. "I found it." Walter closed the store early. Then he invited Ethan into a small office behind the counter. For a while they talked. Walter shared stories from his youth, stories about adventures with William Parker, stories about mistakes, dreams, lessons. The conversation felt warm and genuine. Finally, Walter opened a drawer. Inside rested a small wooden case. He placed it on the desk. "Your grandfather asked me to keep this." Ethan looked at the case. "What is it?" Walter smiled. "Open it." Carefully, Ethan lifted the lid. Inside was a pocket watch, the same pocket watch he had seen in the wooden chest in the attic. But this one contained an engraving. He examined it closely. The words made him smile. "Every story matters," Walter nodded. "That was your grandfather's favorite saying." Ethan laughed softly. "It sounds like him." "It does." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Walter leaned forward. "Your grandfather was proud of you." The words hit Ethan unexpectedly. Walter continued. "He talked about you all the time." Ethan looked down. Emotion filled his chest again. "He believed you would understand the lesson." "And did I?" Walter smiled. "What do you think?" Ethan considered the question. Then he thought about everything that had happened, the key, the oak tree, the hidden chamber, the letters, the memories, the stories. And finally the realization that life's greatest treasures are often invisible. Not things, experiences, relationships, moments, people. Slowly he nodded. "Yes," Walter smiled. "I think so too." That evening, Ethan returned home. The pocket watch rested in his hand. The sunset painted the sky with shades of gold and orange. As he sat on his balcony, he reflected on the entire journey. A simple key had changed everything. Not because it unlocked wealth, because it unlocked understanding. His grandfather had given him one final gift. Not an object, a lesson, a way of seeing the world, and that gift would remain valuable for the rest of his life. As darkness slowly settled across the horizon, Ethan looked up at the stars. Then he smiled. Somewhere he imagined his grandfather smiling too. The mystery had ended. But the story would continue, because every life contains stories worth remembering. Every family contains lessons worth sharing, and every journey, no matter how small, has the power to change a person forever. The old key had opened more than a box. It had opened Ethan's eyes, and that was the greatest treasure of all. The end.